Welcome to Hot Topics in International Trade, brought to you by Braumiller Law Group and Braumiller Consulting Group. Hi, this is Bob Brewer with Braumiller Law Group and Braumiller Consulting Group, coming with you once again with a podcast, and my buddy now, my VP of Braumiller Consulting Group here, Robert Stein.
Hey, Bob.
All right, walking encyclopedia of international trade compliance. So today we're going to talk about this USMCA utilization and kind of fill in some gaps here, especially in my mind about how to qualify. But what is the benefit of qualifying goods in the USMCA? Give us that right off the bat.
I love that question because so many people get involved in USMCA and they lose sight of what is the benefit. Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And the answer is, ultimately the answer is that it saves duty, right? So whether you're an importer and you're trying to save duty on your importations from Canada and Mexico, an exporter selling goods to Canada or Mexico, trying to help your buyers save the duty, or you're in a supply chain like automotive where other manufacturers are relying down the line on your USMCA claims to help substantiate their regional value content or their originating materials in the finished goods. So that's the benefit, right? The big benefit is duty-free. And by the way, that's a great leadoff question because I have a great story about that.
Okay.
I once had a company that called me in a panic. Their USMCA person had left. And so all their knowledge and expertise that they had had over the years was gone. And they're like, help us, we're coming up on renewal. We need to know how to fill out this form for next year. So I get to their facility and they have at the time it was NAFTA actually.
Yeah, okay.
And so they had their NAFTA form, and on it they had, goods from US and goods from Canada, and they had goods from China and Japan. I said, well, these Chinese and Japanese goods can't be on here. I said, they don't qualify, right? But then they were like, oh my God, but we don't know. I started telling them what's involved, and we can talk more about that, but I started telling them what's involved in qualifying for USMCA. And they're like, we haven't done any of that. How do we know that our goods qualify? And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Where do you sell all your goods to? They said they sell everything to Canada.
Okay.
I said, okay. Have you looked at what the duty rates of your goods are into Canada without, at the time, NAFTA, now USMCA? And they said no. So we looked, and guess what the duty rate was on all of their goods except for one item?
What was it, 25?
Free.
Free?
It was duty free.
Yeah.
And so I said, why are you even filling out these certifications? It's already duty free. Well, they said, well, the broker asked us to. And so very often people fill out a USMCA, formerly NAFTA certification because the broker, the customs broker, we need a, USMCA certification. And if it's duty free and the benefit of USMCA is duty free, why are you doing it?
Yeah. It's a waste of time, Robert.
It's more than that. I think you're going to ask me a question about why, and we'll see why it's not a good idea.
Well, I mean, I look at it from, there's so many aspects to this program. I mean, are there risks associated with utilizing it?
Yes. Yeah. Well, really? so that was my point. Is that so you're qualifying the goods for a program that's duty free when the goods are already duty free. The risk is that if you make an improper claim, you could be liable for a penalty, things like $10,000 per transaction, meaning per shipment. So if you have a blanket USMCA declaration and you bring in 100 shipments, 100 times 10,000 is, I'm doing the quick math, a lot of money, right?
A lot of money. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, there is a liability. It's also, there's a potential embarrassment. What do I mean? You're a U.S. manufacturer and you're selling to someone in Mexico who says, oh, I really want this USMCA. It makes it much cheaper. So you fill out the forms, the certification, and then, you call on someone like me and I come in and say, oh, these goods don't qualify for USMCA. Now, by rule, right, by regulation or agreement, you have to go back to that buyer in Mexico and say, sorry, guys. Remember all that stuff that I sold you that was duty-free? Guess what? It's not. Now, it's up to them whether or not they go to Mexican customs and correct the claim. They should,
okay,
right? But just the embarrassment of going to them and saying, sorry, guys, I kind of messed you up. And this could go back 5 years or more for them. And so this is a really embarrassing thing. It also, if you sold, remember I talked about the automotive space. Well, if you're in the automotive space and that OEM manufacturer down the road is trying to accumulate all the pieces so they qualify under regional value content, and those rules are getting stricter and stricter each year, right? And now you have to go, gee, sorry guys, remember that engine that we sold you that's like a really big chunk of the car's value? Sorry, doesn't qualify. And now their whole regional value content calculation could be upset and their claim for duty-free treatment could be negated. So there's a lot of risks that could be there that people don't think about when someone says, hey, just does it qualify for USMCA? Just send us the certification and we'll be done. Not so fast. You need to make sure you understand those risks. So very important.
Well, then that brings up in my head, I said, begs the question, then what's the best process for, claiming USMCA on imports and certifying goods for export or domestic sale? Give me the process so I understand this.
Right,
fully.
right. There's a whole bunch of people probably listening to the podcast going, process? There's a process for doing this? What?
Yeah.
I don't just fill out the certification and I'm done.
There's a process.
I bought it at Walmart in the U.S. It must qualify. No, there is a process. So I think the process starts with, like we talked about, right? The process starts with, is there a reason for a claim? Is it appropriate to make a claim? Because if there's not an appropriate basis to make a claim, like, for example, that company that was selling to Canada goods that were duty-free.
Yeah.
Why would you make a claim? It's not appropriate. So you say, no, thank you. Now, this is important because whether you decide to make a claim or not, that should be specified in your sales contract or purchase order. So that's a big part of your process, is making sure that once you make a determination about whether or not a claim is appropriate, that you want to make sure that everybody, each party to the transaction, is fully aware and legally bound through the sales contract or purchase order that you've agreed that you are or are not issuing a USMCA certification, or if you're the purchaser, that they are going to issue that to you or not. Because a lot of times we get these situations where you sell to Mexico and they just automatically assume you're going to issue that. But if you're not going to issue it, you better put that in your sales contract or purchase order or you have a problem. So the next thing you want to do is make sure you actually have a documented process internally for actually qualifying goods for USMCA. If you're an importer, are you communicating with your seller in Canada or Mexico to understand that they understand how to qualify goods for USMCA? And if you're an exporter, do you have the expertise, right, to basically validate and qualify your goods? And lastly, understand when you have to update your USMCA claim. So any changes to sourcing, any changes to production may result in changes to USMCA claims. So not just once a year for blanket certifications do you check your USMCA claims, but you need to know what are the things that will trigger a review of USMCA and a re-review of those certifications.
Well, then specifically, how often should I be reviewing these, USMCA certifications?
Once a year is fine.
Once a year is fine?
No, I'm kidding.
All right.
That would be nice. So once a year is the absolute bare minimum, right? Okay. And again, when there's changes to sourcing, when there's changes to production, we absolutely want to make sure we're re-reviewing. But some companies will review on an ongoing basis. And the more robust your review process, the more critically you look at it, the better. This is a great service to outsource for managed services, this whole FTA, USMCA, whether it's USMCA or Korea, US, or whatever free trade agreement. Because keeping track of these things can be difficult, but having processes internally that people understand those triggers, because I think that's important. It's great to say in your manual, oh yeah, we're going to re-review this every time there's a change in production. But if you don't actually make sure people know that, no one will tell you.
Yeah. So there is an easier way then to handle the complexities of this USMCA then. That's it.
There is or isn't.
Yeah, I'm just taking it all in. I think, what's the easiest way to be doing this right now?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way is to really have that expertise on your staff if you're going to handle it internally. Yeah. And if you don't have that expertise, or you're not comfortable that you have it, or you're worried about covering it in case they're out on vacation or whatever, you definitely want to see USMCA or any free trade agreement validations and qualifications as a managed service that you can outsource to someone like Braumiller as one of our managed services, right? This takes that out of your responsibility in terms of having to go through and make sure goods qualify. Yes, as a managed service partner, you still need to let us know when there are changes, when we have to re-review, but we can take that on and make sure that the goods do qualify originally and they continue to qualify with the changes in sourcing and production. We'll also let you know when goods don't qualify, and we can give you educated information about how you can make goods qualify that don't qualify, maybe making minor changes to sourcing, minor changes to production that will help you get that qualification and that certification for USMCA. So people often see this as a binary either or. It's either qualifies or it doesn't. But working with a good partner like us, we can actually help you to help qualify those goods, change your process, change your sourcing to get things qualified.
You know, it's funny, but when you talk about the sourcing, what comes to my mind is the recent circumvention on the steel and aluminum that has taken place by a bad actor. I just really like to get your thoughts on that.
I think when it comes to USMCA, right, we have to be really careful. So yes, you can do tariff engineering. You can find ways to qualify your goods for USMCA by changing sourcing. But the two things you really have to be concerned about is, where are my materials coming from? Is somebody trying to circumvent, special duties, trade remedy duties, anti-dumping duties by transforming them through USMCA when it's not appropriate? Or are we dealing with a situation where people aren't really transforming things? They're simply just using a USMCA certification to reclassify things and make them, eligible. So these are very particular circumstances, and they point to a need to have real diligence and exercise reasonable care when it comes to making USMCA claims. Whether you're an importer and you're concerned with what your seller is doing to qualify the goods to bring them to you, which is really what we're talking about here with circumvention, or you're an exporter, we have concerns as well, right? Because there could be situations where your goods might be incorporated in products that are circumventing duties as well. But really, for importers, having that process, you asked earlier about what is the best process. Having that documented process, really making sure that when you're buying goods, right, especially these days from Mexico, there's a lot of foreign direct investment of China and Mexico. So we need to be aware of that. And you need to have processes in place to make sure that your sellers and manufacturers in Mexico are following the rules, that they understand the rules. This is a big problem with USMCA. A lot of people just think, oh, I bought it in Mexico, it qualifies. Or it was made in an IMEX, so it automatically qualifies. So these are statements that are not necessarily true. And again, making sure people in the process know what they're doing, and that the due diligence and the reasonable care is exercised by you as an importer. And I think this is really where having a partner like Braumiller, either on a project basis or bringing it to us as a managed service, where we can really service this and make sure that you're not going to fall into those traps of circumvention and non-qualifying goods.
Got it. Well, that's a lot of good information. I appreciate you stopping by. As you know, I like to keep these to around 15 minutes, Robert. Our time is up, but thank you, sir. And thanks to everyone out there for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you later.